to On Air with B&B.
I'm Brittany.
And I'm Bethany, and we are two mental health therapists with real talk and mental health tips that matter. So we were talking about selective mutism in our last video, kind of like what to look out for, what signs to look for, some possible misunderstandings for parents and adults if they suspected that their kids or even themselves maybe might have selective mutism.
Right.
And we kind of promised that we would follow up with a video about like how to help individuals with selective mutism, I guess, find their voice, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just going to be strategies, approaches that we've used in therapy and treatment that have been successful, and we have a plethora of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you kind of tell your most recent story because Brittany was talking about this just 2 weeks ago about one of her clients and where she started and where she is now. And obviously there's still more work to do, but just something to like shed some light on, I guess like how it could be and how it can be to provide hope.
Absolutely. So this particular client is an adult right now, mid-20s, and she has received therapeutic, interventions and counseling and seen professionals since her early youth.
She had people in the past, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she's seen numerous of different professionals and never received like a genuine answer, right? Was diagnosed with, depression and anxiety, but that was about it, and just felt like her answers weren't really being answered. She felt like there was something more, right? Even being medicated to this day. So she's seen like so many, right? But when she was kind of an adult, she noticed that her symptoms were still persistent and in some situations even exacerbated, depending on the situation or the circumstance. And so this particular client came to me almost 2 years to date.
I can't even believe that. It doesn't feel like she's been there that long.
I know. It's so amazing though, because when she came in, it was, a lot of negative self-talk.
And I want to say her mom, because I do most of the consults, her mom called and she's an adult, I think because of the selective mutism.
Right, I was just going to say.
That just popped into my head. Her mom called to talk about
because she
therapy.
So full disclosure, this particular adult client wanted therapy and still wants therapy because I'm super awesome. And so she still comes to me. I am, And so she still comes and we still do a lot of work together. But with all of that being said, the level of severity of the selective mutism, if you will, because of her anxiety, which, mind you, was being treated since she was an adolescent, which is mind-blowing to me. It's just she hadn't had adequate, evaluations and assessments conducted.
Did they know that it was specifically selective mutism?
No.
Or was it just generalized anxiety?
No. So I was the one,
Because I don't remember her mom mentioning that
she didn't come to
consult.
it. No, she didn't come to it. She got the diagnosis with me within her practice.
Like when you started to work with her, you're like,
Correct.
something more is going on here. I even remember talking with you about that. Like, you're like, all of a sudden, she like just stops.
And so we conducted evaluations and assessments. I referred her to a really great specialist as well, just for additional medical information and things like that. So she has it across the board, and she has like a really fantastic team right now. And with all that being said, she got the official diagnosis between me and another professional, and so it just provided this like huge sense of relief. And, now kind of like fast forward through interventions and techniques and strategies that we're about to share with you all, kind of like tuning in with us. Now I almost said her name. I was just so proud. Now this client is traveling internationally with friends. Now this client is starting to advocate for herself. Full disclosure, again, we'll talk a little bit about this, but I do host like an adults social skills group as well. And I think that is so helpful for these types of situations. And we'll explain on, why that's effective and things of that nature. But this is a really hopeful story. It did take 2 years. This particular individual, again, was not diagnosed with selective mutism until her early 20s. And then with 2 years of clinical counseling has made tremendous success.
Yeah.
Right?
Is she on an SSRI? Okay. What medication is she on?
She is on a stimulant.
Okay. Because, and the reason why I ask is because, and with generalized anxiety as well. SSRIs seem to be the way that a lot of psychiatrists like to go to help give you more serotonin and to lessen the anxiety. So I just didn't know when you said that she was on meds.
Right. So we did do a, so there's 2 different types of like genotype assessments that I, highly encourage everyone to look into. It kind of alleviates this whole trial and error through medications. And so there's one called gene site testing.
The swab.
Yeah. So it's either a swab or one collects your saliva.
Yeah.
And they send it to your house, and most insurances in the United States of America cover it.
One of my clients actually took one last week, and we were on the phone with the psychiatrist, and she said after insurance, I think after their particular plan, it was $300.
Yeah.
But $300 to find out exactly what medications will work with your body chemistry and what ones won't takes a lot of the trial and error away, and a lot of the adversity towards taking medication if you need it, because a lot of people, especially with stimulants or SSRIs, will take medications. It won't be the right one. They might have bad side effects, and then they're like, we don't want to do this anymore before they've seen the benefits of what it could do.
Yeah, unfortunately, this particular client, especially, when she was a little bit younger, her body did not respond well to the SSRIs. It exacerbated other symptoms. And, that is, full disclosure, one of the side effects of medications, right? Again, gene site testing and genomite testing. I think would be so beneficial, especially for our children and adolescents. Like for our parents who are tuning in, for your child or for your children. If you are a parent you're like, okay, I've spent so much like investment, like time.
I'm like staring at your nails. I'm sorry, they're so pretty. She just got them done today.
I did. You remind me. All my clients are like, "Let me see your nails." Thanks, girl. But no, it's really important to if you are considering medication, to really look at those 2 assessments.
Yeah. No, I was like really excited to hear that it's super expensive, because I assumed that it was.
Right. Without insurance, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. The FDA just recently approved it, and so that's why it is relatively new. And when I say relatively new, I mean within the decade, right? And in hindsight, that is relatively new in the medical and clinical field, right? So again, gene site testing, genomine testing, it kind of eliminates or at least mitigates to a certain degree, medications that your child or you as an adult can respond to effectively.
But medication can only take you so far.
Correct.
We're very, very big on letting our clients know. First of all, we don't always jump to medications until we've tried other interventions, which I think we've spoken about
at
length. But if everyone's working, if the client's working, the parent's working, the therapist is working, and we're all working together in applying these interventions, and we're not seeing much progress, or none or no progress, then that's when we kind of say okay, hey, we might need that other biological component to help and aid and get us there, because there's a blockage, basically, is how I look at it. I remember a psychiatrist in my career describing it as like a clogged drain. And then you're pouring the Drano in, and then it unclogs it and allows you to use all of the things, the tools that you're learning.
Absolutely.
So medication is just a small portion of, the solution. We really need to look at, the bigger, longer term pictures. So exposure therapy is one of my favorite types of therapies, for lots of different diagnoses, but especially for selective mutism. I always describe it as to my kiddos and their parents as picturing. And I always picture the same one that I used to play in. It was my friend across the street. She had this really cool tree fort that her dad had built her. And I want to say it had 6 steps on it. And I always say, could we get up into that tree house by taking a big running leap and just getting through the door, or skipping steps? And I guess we could, but it would be risky. It wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't feel safe.
No.
It might not turn out so well. And so that's how we want to picture exposure therapy, one step at a time to get to our goal. So we expose the client in small increments, where if we get up, we go up a step, we see how it feels, we may need to go right back down and take some more time on this step. and then try it again, you know, and get there one step at a time. So the first step might just be thinking about talking to somebody in an unpreferred setting that makes us super anxious and fearful, not even like necessarily doing it,
just a thought of it.
Like picturing that in your head. I don't know how you do it, but that's how I kind of like, that's usually where I start. Let's just think about that, or let's just read about that, or let's watch a video about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really great, like the exposure therapy and the specific intervention within that theoretical approach that Bethany's referring to is called the exposure ladder. And I think the exposure ladder is so critical and it's so pivotal for the success of selective mutism clients.
It gives them a visual.
It gives them a visual, and it's in their control.
Yes.
Right? And so for our counselors or like other professionals that are like tuning in today, I really want to encourage and remind all of the professionals that this is like the client's work and the client's journey and not ours. And so when we're creating continuously and collectively, we're collaborating on what these specific goals can look like for the ladder. It's great that we could provide insight and suggestions, but we can't create it for them.
No.
Right?
And I always also want to add, each step gets like a small reward.
Yes.
Each time, just to activate that part of the brain that, you know, gives off that feeling of good vibes and like this was, you know, a good thing to like keep doing and keep practicing as well. Because yes, there is that top goal, but we need like a smaller carrot, so to speak, for each step, you know, not just one, or will seem discouraging maybe.
Yeah. And like depending on the client, depending on the severity, depending on where the client is at in regards to like my relationship with that client in like a therapeutic way, or, you know, the comfortability of that client, sometimes it requires like a few different exposure ladders, right? So even though the ultimate goal is to get this individual, whether that be child, adolescent, or adult, speaking in these like uncomfortable situations, maybe for the child, it could be in school, or for the adolescent, it could be, you know, at their new swim team or their dance studio.
Or an adult in a meeting.
Or an adult in a meeting, right? That could be the ultimate big goal, but that may not be the big goal that they want to work towards right now. And that is okay, right? Progress is continuous, right? And it's something that we always continue to work on, especially as professionals. That's the regard that I demonstrate and, you know, the narrative that I provide to all of my clients across the board. And so for the exposure ladder, I definitely sit down and just say like, hey, like, what's the big goal for you right now? And I'm very intentional when I say that, because the big goal for right now may not be the big goal forever. And, you know, and that can always change. But the exposure ladder, I say, hey, give me some examples on like how we can get to that big goal, right? And so we'll just like write it down. I usually like to write it down on like Post-it, something that you can actually move. Or like sometimes you can use like a whiteboard, or you could use it like old fashioned and like type it out on a computer. And then I usually will print it out for like my adult clients especially. And I'll have them like number and allow them the control of like what they're comfortable with starting first, and allowing them to create the ladder essentially, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think even for adults, you deserve the reward too, because you're working super hard, right? It's kind of like when you're going to work, whether you love your job or maybe dislike your job, going to work, your biggest motivator to go to work is the monetary benefit during your paycheck, right? That is your reward. So reminding yourself, like, even though you are an adult, it is not juvenile to reward yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So.
I've had a ton of kids. Once upon a time, like we only see kids now in the office, but we used to do like in community settings and whatnot, which was actually like really helpful. We just unfortunately don't have like a lot of time for that now, because it just really takes up so much time. So I usually give it as like a homework assignment type thing.
Yeah.
But like make it like a fun outing. Like we've got a lot of kids with selective mutism that don't want to like order food, or they don't want to, you know, pay for their items at a store, because again, you might have to speak and you could get something wrong. And again, that's kind of the fear of selective mutism, is saying something wrong, or, you know, not saying the right thing, or being judged by what you said. And so we'll make it fun. Like, okay, well today we're gonna like, I remember one time I took this kid and I said, we're gonna go to the dollar store, and I'm gonna, you know, give you, you know, $30, which he was I think 9, so that seemed like $1 million.
So much to him, yeah.
And you get 30, you could get 30 things,
right.
Well,
maybe like 28.
Well, right, but he's 9, so he wasn't thinking about tax.
My bad.
They don't think about tax yet, and at least my 10-year-old is not.
You're like, well, more like.
Yeah. So I was like, we're gonna, you're gonna go in and you're gonna pick all of these things, and then you're going to have to go up and pay for it, and I would give him my card, and you're going to have to do that. And I didn't even go in the store, and I put on a timer, and I said, and I gave him a timer, and I gave myself a timer, and I said it was for 5 minutes, and I said every 5 minutes you can come outside and talk to me. But then we had another timer. He would come out for the 5-minute mark, and then he would talk to me for 30 seconds. And then the times in between, it was like 30 seconds, then it was 25 seconds, then it was, to kind of fade back. And so to work towards that, but he kept going back, even though he was uncomfortable, because it was motivating for him to get the thing.
Right.
So that's a different way you could do exposure therapy too.
Absolutely.
And I have.
Yeah, I love that. I think so. Social skills groups is a form of exposure therapy as well.
Yes.
We have a lot of social skills groups here at our office, like at our practice, but I also host social skills group. I have one for adults specifically out in the community, right? Who struggle with different, social situations, right? And some, not all.
Speak. Some have selective mutism. Some speak too much or too loudly or off topic. I mean, they have different social issues, right?
Yeah.
But yet all working towards the same goal, so to speak, which is to get along in society with people and have friendships and meaningful relationships with people.
Absolutely. And I think specifically for social skills group and selective mutism, it's exposure therapy because you're exposing the individual, whether child, adolescent, or adult, in something that makes them a little uncomfortable. However, you're still having that supportive person. And me as the clinician, as the professional, I'm not there as a crutch. I'm there to observe, take notes, and then offer feedback so that they can
let each one of them pick a different
I do sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes I let them pick their own place and set the reservations and text in a group chat, hey guys, this is it, because this is socially appropriate, right? Initiating, communicating, following through, and things of that nature. And I think for selective mutism, it's interesting, right? But again, it's so helpful, and social skills group is a part of exposure therapy because you're exposing them to the thing that they struggle with or that presenting challenge or concern that is consistent with the selective mutism symptoms, right? I'm trying to think if there's anything else for exposure therapy regarding selective mutism.
There's a ton of things. Again, in the community, it's a lot easier. Going to a restaurant, like you said, having to order, having to make the reservation, I think was a really good one because that's one that I know a lot of, adults with selective mutism and adults without it who just haven't had to do it. And I'm saying younger adults for this one because typically by the time that you're older, you've had more practice, but they don't even like to make doctor's appointments for themselves.
Right, they don't.
It's my mom will make that for me.
Right. I also see it too, that actually struck a chord, because I also have seen it with adults with selective mutism, not only not wanting to call to make appointments or even have sessions in a virtual capacity. I've experienced that firsthand. But even those adults with selective mutism, I've noticed that in certain social situations, in conversations, even though they get to that level, they'll still have those freeze up moments. And then they're oh my gosh, Britt, when I freeze up in that moment, how do I handle that? Right? Just working through that. And I think this is a good segue into another theoretical approach.
I think CBT is a good one. Feminist theory is a good one.
Yeah. Mindfulness techniques just in general, which are grounding techniques, meditation, breathing techniques. It can really calm your nervous system because that does play a huge role. Anxiety definitely can trigger in a negative light and negatively impact your entire nervous system. That's what reproduces those psychosymptomatic symptoms, right? And so I think it's important, with CBT, and you'll notice a lot of integrative approaches. So for those of you who don't know what that means, it's a clinical terminology that we use that means we're integrating different types of approaches and techniques for the most effective and appropriate results, right? Towards the goal that the client wants to achieve, not necessarily us as clinicians, right? I always like to shed light on that because I'll have clients like, oh, Britt, like, what do you think I need to work on? I'm like, well, what are you willing to work on?
Yeah.
Right? And so talking about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically in connection with selective mutism, is super effective if done appropriately, accurately, and consistently.
CBT,
Now,
I always say, to everyone that I'm introducing it to, it's pretty easy to understand the concept of it, but it's not easy to do or you wouldn't be here. That's what I say to all of my parents and kids.
Same.
If we were doing this and it was so easy to do this all the time, why would you even be here? You wouldn't need me. And so we teach it in different ways each week that the clients come when this is something that we're working towards. And then I also have them do it at home as practice, so like I'll say, okay, so this week in between session, whenever, you can think about a behavior, like maybe that behavior or behaviors that happened that day or that week that was unfavorable, maybe think backwards. Okay, well, this unfavorable behavior happened because I was feeling unfavorable feeling, which means I was thinking an unfavorable thought, an automatic negative thought about a situation, and then move forward on what could I have thought differently about that situation, and then play the devil's advocate of what then would I have felt and how would I have responded. And practice that, even though the behavior and the event and the feelings and the thoughts already happened, but to practice, just go backwards and write each one down, and then how you go backwards and then go forward. And because you have to practice it, or it's not going to just automatically in the moment when we're feeling that fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, or whatever stress response. If we haven't practiced the interventions when we're calm and not feeling these stress responses, we're not going to be able to use it when they're occurring. It's just not going to happen.
Right, absolutely. It's kind of comparable to like learning a new skill. Like, for example, riding a bike, right? Like, first time riders on a bike, you're not going to just like hop onto the bicycle and just be like, oh yeah, like I'm a professional. Like, absolutely not. You're going to like fall, hurt yourself. Hopefully not too bad, but like it's going to happen, right? Because it's like a new skill. And if you don't practice that, are you going to get better? Absolutely not. Right. And so it's so important. And because I have so many clients, well, Miss Britt, like these aren't working. And I'm like, okay, honey, like, well, are you practicing them? Well, why would I practice something? I tried it once, right? And it's like, okay, great. So you rode your bicycle once and you fell, right? It seems like, are we going to give up?
And what I find a lot of times too, when they say it's not working, and I ask them, well, tell me, and they say, oh, it's not working. Well, tell me how you did it.
Yeah, show me.
Show me how you did it. Tell me how you did it. And this is to parents and the kids, like whether it be the parents implementing or the kids practicing, And then typically when they start to explain it to me, they missed a step or they missed like a detail. And even though it's a small detail, it was an important detail. So then I'm like, okay, so this is why we need to practice, because even if we miss one detail, it could change the whole trajectory of if it works or if it doesn't work.
Absolutely. I think with CBT, the biggest thing is, again, specifically towards our individuals, children, adolescent, adults, right, in any capacity. For selective mutism, cognitive behavioral therapy is basically switching your negative intrinsic thought to something positive. Because you have a negative thought, how are you going to feel? Negative. And if you feel negative, or if you're experiencing like a negative emotion in that moment, how are you going to respond, behave, or act? Typically negative, right? However, if you kind of circle back to the initial thought, if you change that to something positive or something at least optimistic, I tell that to a lot of my clients as well. Because, in some situations, it is really crappy, right? So, for example, like an uncomfortable situation for like my selective mutism clients, if you will. Gosh, I have a work meeting, right? I have a work meeting and, I'm super stressed out about this. Or I have this big test, Miss Britt, and, the client could be like in kindergarten and they're like, oh, I got this big test, and
sight reading.
Right, it's sight reading and you have to stand up and you have to like or read out loud to the class. You know, they do that, unfortunately, and it could be very anxiety driven and trigger that anxiety symptoms, right? But anywho, scheme, I think it's important to remember that when you are experiencing those things, think of a positive, right? So instead of saying, oh my gosh, I have to read in front of the class, that has like a negative connotation, right? Or, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about this work event. What if I say something wrong? What if I mess up on the sight words in my kindergarten class? What if I say something like wrong in the work meeting and now everyone's judging me? These are all negative thoughts, correct? However, I always encourage my clients through practicing different situations, whether that be perspective taking skills, role play situations, or Bethany has this really cute CBT board game that I really enjoy, and I will either utilize that or modify the game so that it's age appropriate, because sometimes it's too old for some of my little clients, like my 2, 3, 4-year-olds, or it's just too juvenile for my adult clients that are in their 20s and 30s, right? And so I think it's important to, like, you know, as a clinician, for the clinicians who are watching or professionals who are watching in any capacity, modification is huge. So yes, we're kind of giving you guys these examples, but definitely encouraging you guys to appropriately modify these examples so that they are age and developmentally and cognitively appropriate for your child, your children, or maybe for you as an adult, right? And so for CBT, thinking of things positively. Another example that I like to do with CBT is, like, you know, if any of my clients are watching, they're gonna be like, oh gosh, here goes Britt. So I do this every single day. I kid you guys not. Every single one of my clients know this example, and all my parents do, because I bring it up in parent sessions all the time. So you have person A and you have person B, right? They're both the same people, and they're both gonna take a test, right? And maybe this test is a verbal presentation, like it's a PowerPoint of whatever capacity, okay? And I'm saying that because, again, this is all surrounding and in conjunction with selective mutism, all right? And both person A and person B have been working on their selective mutism, like symptoms, and being able to, like, manage it. However, they have one person A has a negative thought going into this presentation. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to do well. I'm going to fail this. I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm going to say something like wrong, and
they're going to laugh at me.
Yeah, everyone's going to laugh at me. Everyone's going to make fun of me. All these things, right? Going into it. Or person B with a more optimistic, positive, or at least a balanced perspective. Hey, I'm going to just try my best. That's more optimistic, right? A more balanced example of going into, like, this verbal PowerPoint presentation for school is, hey, I just need to try my best. Or, hey, I'm human first. If I make a mistake, so what? Right? That's more balanced.
Everybody else is probably nervous too.
Right.
Half of them might not even be listening to me because they're worrying about their own presentation.
Right. Or, like, another example for person B that's positive rather than optimistic or even balanced, which is balance I'm referring to as, like, neutral, you know? Positive in this situation could be something along the lines of, you know what? I believe in myself and I'm going to rock it, right? And that's positive. Who do you think is going to be more successful in their verbal PowerPoint presentation? Ding, ding, ding. Person B. Why is that? Because our mindset can and will, not if, but can and will impact how our thoughts and our feelings, right? Or I'm sorry, our feelings and our emotions, and how we respond to that, right? And so CBT, which plays a huge role into, like, how we're choosing to think, because it is a choice and we can choose. I'm not insinuating that it's easy.
It's not easy.
It's not easy at all, right? Like,
you have to catch yourself.
Absolutely.
Typically, people catch themselves when they're already behaving not well.
Right. Like, I am a professional and I'm the first to disclose to you guys, and, like, I'm not perfect, and I struggle with this I struggle with it, like, too often, maybe not on a daily basis, but there are moments where, like, I get anxious. Like, when I went to go, like, do my presentation, I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my first time. And then I had to, like, stop
I'm out
myself.
of my league.
Yeah, I'm out of my league. Who is going to listen to little old me? Like, who is this? Like, you know, like, I'm just, like, and I had to be like, Brittany, hold up.
And even this podcast, like, you know, we don't know what we're doing. Like, we really don't. Like, I forgot what I used to call it, but it was like something budget productions. It was so funny.
Yeah, we used to say that.
And, but we were like, you know, at first we were like, we have to make it perfect. It has to be right. Now we're like, we don't care. Like, as long as we're getting information out there for people, and it's helping even one person, that's our way of looking at it positively. Like, then we're doing a good job, and we have fun every time.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. This is something that we thoroughly enjoy, and I think our biggest motivation is just, we believe that mental health is a part of healthcare. And we firmly believe that healthcare in all capacities should be accessible to everyone. And so that is our reason, as a quick sidebar, as to why we created this podcast, right? But to kind of circle back, because it did play a role, because, Bethany was just shedding light that, we thought we had to have like this perfectionist tendencies and things of that, or we had this perfectionist mindset.
Just right.
Right. And no, because that's unrealistic, unattainable, and then we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? And so to circle back to the CBT regarding selective mutism, it is so important because our mindset does play a huge role into our potential success.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I think like what you could say to yourself if you had selective mutism and you were using CBT is, okay, I recognize that I'm thinking to myself, what if I speak and I say the wrong thing? But like in our last video, I said, what did I say? Selective autism.
Oh yeah.
And I totally said the wrong thing. That's not even a thing, by the way.
Yeah,
so I'm selecting to be autistic today, but then I was like, whatever, moving on, because it was a mistake. And then I got other information out there that was helpful. So at the end of the day, I might say something wrong, but who cares as long as I reach my end goal, which is to help people.
Right. So I just think like it's so important to give some grace to yourself as you or your child or your children who may be struggling with selective mutism, because it's not an easy fate. It's not. It's really challenging and it's really uncomfortable, right? And again, it's not a choice. Let's be very transparent about that. And so another thing that, we can, I think you should talk a little bit about feminist theory. Okay. Yeah. So I think like another thing that's going to be really important is feminist theory. What is feminist theory? A lot of people have this misconception, like even clinicians and like fellow colleagues and professionals and doctors, that I've had to actually do a lot of psychoeducation on and inform them of what feminist theory is appropriately supposed to do, right? For lack of better terms. It has nothing to do with just women. It's very effective for all individuals and all genders and all walks of life, because feminist theory at the end of the day is just about empowerment, right? It's about believing in yourself. And I utilize that specific strategy within that theoretical approach to motivate and to encourage all of my clients, right? And all of my parents as well. Because what we're promoting is change. And we've talked about this in many, if not all of our videos in the past, but change is hard, change is uncomfortable, right? And change does help facilitate growth, but that doesn't insinuate that it's easy, because it's not. Let's be transparent, right? And so with all of that being said, feminist theory approach is really beneficial because you're promoting positive words of affirmation, you're promoting confidence, you're promoting empowerment, you're promoting self-love. I even sprinkle in a lot of self-care and what that looks like.
Getting your nails done.
Getting my nails done, all the fun things, getting a massage, all the fun things. But it's really important because when you pour into yourself, you are helping yourself grow even more. I always tell people this saying, you can't grow in a fire. You got to put it out first. And what do I mean by that? It's once the fire's out, you're doing all the work and everything like that. How do you facilitate growth in a forest or in a garden in any capacity? You water it, and you have to be patient, but you have to nourish it, right? And nourishment includes positive words, positive thinking. When I say positive words, I'm referring to positive words of affirmation. And for those of you who don't know what that looks like, it's I am loved, I am amazing, I'm capable, I am smart, I can do hard things, I can overcome my fears, and kind of speaking truth and manifesting that for yourself, right? Other examples of feminist theory approach is, we also host confidence and empowerment groups too, right? Not just social skills groups. And the confidence empowerment group is something that I'm very, very passionate about because, as a woman, right, or as women, it's really hard because there's such a huge stigma, that we have to be perfect, especially in 2025. It's we got to do all the things. For example, Bethany, she's a mom, she's a wife, she's also a business owner, and she's a practicing clinician, and we have a podcast, all of the things, right? So as women specifically and especially, there's a huge thing of you got to be all of these different things, and that can apply a lot of pressure. And when you look at research, right, selective mutism, there's a huge population that women struggle with the selective mutism because they just shut down, right? And on the flip side, for males, simultaneously they shut down because of a lot of like gender roles or expectations that are on them, that are whether societal, cultural, religious, any capacity, right? And so, and this is more directed to like our adults, I would say, but it is important because I wanted to like utilize our platform to kind of like speak light to that, right? Feminist theory approach is also really helpful for like differences in like cultural diversities, right? Like I have like a lot of like myself included, like, you know, we have to remember that we are worthy and that we are more than capable. And, you know, even, you know, with different expectations, again, societal, family, cultural, religious, whatever you want to partake in, it's important that you believe in yourself first. Right? And believing yourself in feminist theory, not just for selective mutism. Yes, that's what this video is about, but it's important that everyone does believe in themselves.
Well, and I think it's important, like, to touch on what you just spoke about, like having like cultural, different cultural like beliefs or backgrounds. I could see where culturally, like depending on where you come from, then contributes to your selective mutism, because certain cultures more than others have like that idea that like speaking up or setting boundaries, stating your opinion is disrespectful, right? You know, and so I think that could really play into like your feelings about speaking in certain situations as well, and contribute to selective mutism.
It does, and so it is like, and again, that's not necessarily like, you know, a learned behavior, but it could be exacerbating the symptoms that were already unfortunately present within that individual, if that makes sense, right? And so again, I think feminist theory approach is going to be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think all of these approaches that we've spoke about, you know, exposure therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and feminist theory, like really will help, you know, individuals with selective mutism, along with possibly a psychotropic. And, you know, this isn't really a theory, but the last but not least, I think just having some humor sometimes as a clinician or a parent, when talking to an individual with selective mutism or a teacher, can really help the situation. And what I mean by that is just sometimes like it takes the pressure off. You try to read the individual's body language, and if you can like read the room. My daughter cannot, we're working on that, but like you see the body language and they're kind of freaking out or frozen and not being able to answer the question. Maybe like add a little humor. I mean, Brittany, do your microphone thing. I think you should do it, because she does it in session, and I think, come on, girl.
Oh my God.
Come on. Like she does this in session.
So I'll grab the microphone and be like, all right. So on today's, you know, in today's session with Miss Britt, client is, you know, having a little bit of a moment right now. So I'm going to be happy to take over. And they start cracking
And then she'll literally stick it.
And then I'll be like, your turn.
And it just kind of like takes, again, it breaks the ice, changes the, you know, the atmosphere, and everyone's, I'm sorry, it's funny. At least I think it is.
I do it all the time.
And they think it is. And then there's like laughter, and then we're not in that freeze moment of that stress response, and then maybe we can just laugh for a little bit and then go back to the question and try again, you know? So I think adding
humor,
a little bit of humor,
normalizing it,
and normalizing things can go a long way.
Absolutely.
When somebody's in a panic state.
Absolutely. And just for clarification purposes, whether you're a professional, a parent, a teacher, anything in between, I think it's important. Just because we're normalizing doesn't mean we're justifying nor enabling. Normalizing from like our perspective, right? It's just basically a lot of psychoeducation. Like allowing the client or the parents to understand, what does this mean? What does this look like? And also honing in on that this is not your fault and that this is manageable, right? But also setting the expectation that this doesn't go away. This is not like a treatable thing that just kind of like dissipates, okay? And I say that because we have to be very realistic.
Well, it's treatable. It's just not, it's chronic.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So you're always going to have it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's
not
manageable.
Very
right. It's manageable because we do psychoeducation. So we always say, when people call for consults, Brittany and I always tell people, our approach is like a two-part approach.
Yeah.
One, we provide psychoeducation to the kids and the parents. We talk a lot about like what emotions we feel, why we feel them, how people respond to them differently, to normalize it. Because once we feel like it's something that everybody experiences to some level, to some degree, it's like, instead of there being something wrong, it's like, okay, now let's focus on a solution and how to manage it. And it's so much easier to do that once it doesn't seem like it's only me, or this makes me weird, or, you know, like something's wrong, like it's a defect, you know. And then our second approach is applying like the interventions, you know, to how to manage it, how to find a solution.
Absolutely.
So psychoeducation is just such an important piece. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because it is. It's like you need to like allow the client and the village surrounding the client to understand appropriately what this really means, and honing in on effective tools and strategies to promote the success, right? Again, it's not curable, but yes, it is treatable. It doesn't go away though, but it becomes more, it just becomes easier to manage long term, right? Because you're gonna have the skills and the tools to be more successful across the board. I think for last thing on the counselors, because I do want to talk about parents and like teachers and things too, and give you guys some tips, but for our other professionals that are like tuning in, I think collaboration is super important.
Like, collaboration is key.
It is. And you know, a part of our roles as like therapists is advocacy. And for those of you who are tuning in and you are you have the biggest honor of working with me as your clinician. You know I advocate, right? So like advocacy, I do not take lightheartedly. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy. I think it's one of my favorite parts of like my role as a clinician. Advocacy, especially for my like children, adolescents, because like I don't take it lightly that I'm their voice and I'm their like representation in that capacity to help them like grow and be their biggest like supporter alongside and with their parents. Because here's the thing, parents don't know all of the things, right? Like I think if they did, our occupation really wouldn't exist.
Correct.
And so I'm here as a tool. I'm here as a resource.
They don't always necessarily know what to ask or what resources are available. And that's where we kind of come in and advocate and say, these are the questions you want to ask. These are the resources that are available. Let's see if your child is eligible for them.
Absolutely.
You know?
Whether that just be, you know, additional therapy, social skills, empowerment skill groups, confidence groups, the, you know, accommodations maybe at school to be more successful, and then eventually fade them out, and then working in collaboration with all of these different professionals for the best interest of that client. It's just going to be super, super helpful for parents and for teachers, for both, you know, in those two environments. I never encourage, I actually talk about in parent sessions, you know, like, oh, well, Susie could just say hi. Like, girl, if they could, they would. You know what I mean? Like, again, like, I cannot reiterate this enough. This is not a choice. This is not what they want to do, right? They're not being like shy by default, nor are they like being defiant or stubborn or disrespectful or even rude. It's like they want to partake, they want to engage, they just physically can't in that moment, right? So yeah, I never encourage, I actually do address sometimes that in like parent sessions with like parents of my clients, and just say like, you know, avoid that pressure, right? Adding pressure to a situation that they're already
it's only going to make it worse.
It's only going to make it worse. And I just feel like creating calm routines and being that supportive figure without enabling, and I think that should be another video, right? But being that supportive person without accommodating too much, which sends the wrong message of, I don't believe in you and I don't think you can do it, even though that's definitely not our intention. We're trying to make it easier. Absolutely. And I know in our past like videos, because we've done 2 videos on anxiety, I think, right? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And maybe not at this point. I'm going to be blunt. I don't know. But circling back to earlier videos, like I think praising the efforts are going to be so imperative. Regardless if even they say like a verbal thing, maybe they don't even get out the car. I'm so grateful you got into the car to at least get to the destination. Like that's huge, right? Like I'm just so grateful I'm really open to like having this conversation. You went to the social skills group. You may not have participated, but you got there and you went in. And sat with the other kids. Yeah, like I'm just grateful that you're doing this and like pointing out the efforts, right? Rather than focusing on the negative. Because again, circle back to mindset with the negative intrinsic thoughts, like especially if those thoughts come to light verbally, you're speaking negatively now. And then what does that do? That does not foster a positive environment. That does not foster like positive growth or a positive mindset. That kind of can trigger the client or your child or your children or even yourself as an individual. If you're saying these things out loud to yourself or like internally, it's just gonna like trigger those symptoms and then like potentially exacerbate them and can lead to spiraling, and which easily could lead to some sense of crisis. I've seen it firsthand, right? So I think creating those calm routines. Do you want to give an example of like what that can look like?
I think like a really good one is just basically, it doesn't have to be exactly, you know, we have the schedule, it's on the wall, we do this at this time, we do this at that time, but just having, you know, some kind of routine, so to speak. So for example, my daughter this year, she is doing virtual school. She's been in a regular school setting since she was 3. This year is the first time. We really could get like, we could sleep till whenever we wanted to, you know, and do work at midnight. We could do it on the weekends. But again, like we don't want her to feel overwhelmed, but we also want her to still have some routine so that she knows what to expect and can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Productive.
Right.
And so we still have like, we have one of those like new fancy like skylight calendars, which I really think everyone should check into. They're expensive, but totally worth it. And you know, on there, it'll say, and you know, we get up at 9, okay? So we still have a time that we get up in the morning and a time that we go to bed at night. So she goes to bed around like 10:30. She's 10 years old. And, you know, we get up, we have from like 9 to 10, it's kind of just like, we get up, we brush our teeth, we take our vitamins, we have breakfast, we kind of, you know, like talk and laugh and whatever. And then like, maybe we do something fun for like an hour, like take a walk around the neighborhood or, you know, just whatever. And then around, you know, 11, it's like, okay, we check our emails. Then class starts at 12, you know, and then we do class, we have Spanish at 12. And it's always in the same spot, you know, so that's like the destination for work. Like, so in our home, it's at the dining room table, which we don't eat at, like, let's be honest, unless we have company. Yeah. And, you know, so, you know, that is, she assimilates that with, that's where I'm doing my work. And, you know, when I'm sitting here, I'm focused on my work. But we're not rushing her through it. Like, and during that time, you know, it's quiet in the area. We might have like Alexa playing, you know, like classical, which is always listening, classical music or something calming. My daughter likes spa music a lot. You know, she might have a snack nearby, and then she has, you know, every hour, she might get her Spanish done in a half an hour, but we have from 12 to 1 on the calendar. And then if she finishes, she can do something preferred. But yeah, like it's just, you know, having like structure, but it's not like if we don't do it exactly like this at this time, it doesn't have to be so rigid. So it's also calm and makes her anxiety come down so she can be more intentional when it comes to doing whatever it is she's doing during that time of day.
Absolutely. I love that. So creating those calm routines, I think are going to be super helpful because, you know, again, circling back, like selective mutism is a product of anxiety, right? And so you're simultaneously essentially treating anxiety as well in order to manage effectively the symptoms consistent with selective mutism, right? Yeah. And so for parents, that's kind of like big things as well, specifically that you can implement in the home apart from the therapeutic approaches and the interventions, because those can be successful as well.
You could do that for homework times or extracurriculars or weekends. Like even though the weekend is supposed to be relaxing, still have some kind of structure to the weekend, so that again, you know, it doesn't, again, we can be flexible, but we still have something for, you know, them to kind of know like what to expect, which can really help with anxiety. Exactly. We don't want everything, like it doesn't need to be like at 9 o'clock, this is going to happen on Saturday, but some kind of like, do we have plans this weekend? Are we, going out to dinner with friends? Are we,
right.
Going to the water park, the beach, whatever,
And again, you're probably asking like, how is this related specifically to selective mutism? Well, remember, some of these expectations or some of these social events could be relatively triggering to you as the adult who may struggle with this, or to your child or children who may be struggling with this, right? And so setting them up for these expectations will allow them to be successful, because they understand.
To be more successful.
Right. Because studies and research show, and I've even witnessed it, I know we both have in the capacity of sessions, and it's been disclosed from like parents, teachers, from consultations, other professionals via consultations as well. But clients are going to be, and children and individuals across the board are going to be more successful if they know what to anticipate rather than just like throwing it at them. Why is that? Because it gives them the opportunity to engage in some of these strategies, not as like a coping mechanism, because coping insinuates that you're in the behavior, right? And you're trying to like manage it while you're exhibiting those behaviors or those symptoms in that moment. However, if you give them that expectation and they're able to like think of it prior to it even happening, they can engage in these like therapeutic approaches that are relatively successful as like a preventative strategy to prevent them from spiraling or prevent them from freezing.
Okay, we're going to Urban Air because we're going to a birthday party on Saturday. Let's talk really quickly about, I know that's been like hard for you to go to birthday parties where you don't always know all of the kids. And, I think you're going to do great. I think that, you've been doing a wonderful job meeting new people.
Yeah.
But hey, let's say that you do panic and you do freeze.
Yeah.
What could we do in that moment to kind of pull ourselves out of that stress response, and talking about like, having a plan if that does happen with your child to prepare for it.
No, I love that. I love that a lot. I think that would be really helpful for parents, and even teachers can do that, right? Especially if you know that there's like things coming up that involve like maybe like groups or anything of that nature. And now to address like our teachers, right? I think it'll be really important if you notice like a student, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed, and you're seeing, symptoms consistent, or maybe your student actually has the diagnosis, like what can you do as a teacher, right? Well, there's a lot that you can do. I think one of the best things that you can do is just talking to like the student and just saying like, hey, is there a student that you feel most comfortable with, and pairing them up with like a buddy, right? Or maybe you notice that the student talks more to one student than other students, right? And so pairing them up, or, very intentionally putting that particular students, like those two students next to each other, right? Or assigning them to groups. I think that would be really effective. Do you have any other suggestions?
No, not right now. I mean, that's kind of like all that's coming to mind.
Yeah.
And
like nonverbal, like participation methods, right?
Yeah.
So like PECs could be helpful, right? So picture exchange communications, or just, especially if the student has like an accommodations plan, definitely follow suit to that as well. Or maybe just advocating that your student gets an accommodations plan as a teacher. Like if you're noticing something as a teacher, because you are in that capacity a professional, and you're noticing some concerns, definitely addressing that with the parents and advocating on behalf of your student, and just saying, hey, I'm noticing these things, right? I can't diagnose, I'm not that clinical or medical professional, but I'm noticing these things, and so I just want to advocate on behalf of your child. I wonder how open you would be to like assessing and evaluating, because if that happens earlier rather than later, you can get ahead of a lot of things, right? And teaching that child in that moment on how to like navigate and things of that nature. I think, celebrating the small steps is going to be really important too as a teacher. It's kind of like very comparable to what we suggest to like parents and clinicians and other
praising the efforts, celebrating the small wins.
Yeah.
Also just, going back to the PECs thing, because I'm very on the fence with PECs sometimes with selective mutism, because yes, it does help them communicate. But then I worry that they're going to fall into the trap of like not speaking and always using PECs.
Yeah.
So I guess speaking about PECs and really any type of accommodations that you're ever using with your child, whether it be for selective mutism, generalized anxiety, ADHD, whatever, I think just always like talking with and collaborating with the teachers and the counselors and whoever's involved, parents, talking and reminding ourselves about fading, so that it doesn't become something that they need.
Dependent on.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it's been working. Now we're going to fade it back a little bit and kind of like doing that like little by little.
Yeah. And you can even utilize the exposure therapy technique and the exposure ladder within the exposure therapy approach to help with the fading out, right? And maybe for some of your viewers who don't even know what on earth PECS is, so it stands for Picture Exchange Communications.
Good point.
And so, and so what is PECS? That's what it is, right? And so when I was referring to PECS, I am a big advocate for visual schedules, which can include PECS, especially for like
for the little ones who can't read.
You can't read because it's pictures. So maybe you'll have a picture of a book and you'll say like, oh, that's like story time, or that's like their circle time to like read a book or do like their sight words.
And they have PECS for everything.
Or you can create your own.
And you can find them. Teachers Pay Teachers is a great site.
Yeah.
And it's not expensive.
No.
You can purchase like one thing at a time. You can have a subscription. I think
different options.
Yeah. So I mean, every time I purchase something on there, I'm going to say it's like $2.99. Some things are free. You know, but you can laminate them, you can cut them out, laminate them, put Velcro on them, like switch them around.
Right.
It's super helpful.
It is. And to be very transparent on, you know, to shed some light on what you said, I actually don't suggest PECS in the capacity of utilizing the PECS as their voice. I utilize PECS only so that they understand the expectations. Does that make sense? And so PECS in the capacity of like a visual schedule, right? So visual expectations to kind of alleviate / mitigate those symptoms consistent with the selective mutism, right? But we never really, I mean, I'm a huge firm believer because there's actual studies and clinical trials that support that PECS will be accommodating if students or clients or just children, adolescents, or individuals across the board utilize PECS or anything comparable to that, whether it be like writing notes or like a whiteboard and they're using that, because it will be accommodating and it kind of enables, it kind of circles back to like your example that you said, whether it was earlier in this video or maybe it was our last video about the mask.
Yes. Yeah. It was the last video.
The last video. And so I'm just kind of like sitting and thinking, like, just for clarification purposes, I don't utilize PECS, nor do I encourage it from like a clinical standpoint to use it to represent their voice, right?
Because if you have selective mutism, which we talked about in our last video, it is not that you don't have a voice. It's just that in specific situations
you shut down.
You shut down and you're not able to use it. Whereas PECS, we do encourage using it if you actually are nonverbal and can't speak. So in our last video, we talked about how it's only selective mutism if it's only in certain specific situations, whereas there are children and adults who are nonverbal in all situations and would then use the PECS to communicate.
Absolutely.
And it would be their voice.
Absolutely.
So I want to be clear about that as well.
Absolutely. But for selective mutism, students, clients, children, adolescents, adults, individuals with selective mutism across the board, they have a voice. They just cannot use it in all environments due to the severity of the anxiety that they're experiencing in that moment.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I think this is really great. I think, you know, additional resources, there are like selective mutism association groups. I'm a part of one of them. For clinicians that are tuning in, there is like a subgroup through our counseling association, the American Counseling Association, and you'd be so surprised, or maybe not that surprised, on the different level of resources that they have. So I think that would be really great. I also am a big advocate on parent support groups here at Powerful Principles.
Parent support groups.
I love them. And so for parent support groups, like especially here, like at our practice, like we host parent support groups complementary with all of the groups that we have, right? So for example, if your child is coming in for a social skills group or an empowerment and confidence group, we always have a free parent support group that is optional, but definitely recommended. And the reason that we really believe in that and that we offer that, is because, you know, parents are the ones who are following suit, the treatment plan and the interventions and the approaches like at home. Typically, we only meet with your child as professionals like once a week. I do have some clients that I see twice a week, but most of them are once a week or once every other week. So like twice a month, right? So it's not 24/7 every single day. So that's why it's so important for parent support groups, because you're the one as parents who are kind of like implementing all of the different suggestions and techniques and things and following through with it, right? So it's okay. And I also really love books and podcasts, like ours, you know? I think that would be a really great resource as well. So I say that seriously. But with all that being said, you know, I think that all of these things really help children, adolescents, adults, you know, manage effectively their selective mutism. But nothing is better than individualized care, right?
Absolutely.
So seeking out your best fit counselor who kind of not only understands what selective mutism is, because I think that's going to be really imperative, because not all clinicians or professionals do, but finding a professional who does understand what that looks like and has worked with that population, if you will, successfully in the past, I think that would be a really great start, because that's the best, right? We gave all of these different like tidbits, but I did want to end with that. Individualized care is the best care because it's suitable to your specific needs, because again, everyone is different, right? So again, with all of that being said, thank you for joining us on Air with B&B. Remember that your mental health matters, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you next time.
Bye guys.
I'm looking for some